Listen closely, because what I'm about to say might shatter everything you thought you understood about emotional distance. When someone acts cold, detached, almost indifferent, our instinct is to assume they don't care. But sometimes that coldness isn't absence, it's control. And control is often born from obsession. Let me be clear, obsession doesn't always look like passion. It doesn't always chase. Sometimes it watches. Sometimes it stays quiet. Sometimes it pretends not to need you while quietly centering its entire emotional world around you. Here's the uncomfortable truth we avoid. Emotionally avoidant people don't disconnect because they feel nothing. They disconnect because they feel too much, and it terrifies them. So they go still. They go cold. They withdraw affection not to leave, but to regain power over their own vulnerability. And if you've ever felt confused, like his distance somehow pulls you closer, there's a reason. Cold behavior triggers self-doubt. Self-doubt creates emotional imbalance. And imbalance makes attachment deepen. That's not accidental. When someone is obsessed but emotionally restricted, they don't want intimacy. They want certainty. They want to know you're there without risking themselves. They want you emotionally invested while they stay protected. And the most dangerous part, they often don't even realize they're doing it. So if you've been questioning yourself, wondering why his silence feels louder than words, why his absence feels heavier than presence, pause. This isn't about your worth, it's about his fear of emotional exposure and the quiet intensity hiding behind his distance. Here's the sign most people miss because it doesn't feel like obsession at first. It feels like nothing. No compliments, no emotional reassurance, no obvious desire, but look closer. He remembers details he pretends not to care about. He notices shifts in your tone before you say a word. He tracks your emotional weather without ever stepping into it. That's not detachment. That's hyper-awareness. Obsession doesn't always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it hides behind restraint, and restraint requires effort, a lot of it. When someone truly doesn't care, they're careless, they forget, they drift, they move on. But when someone is obsessed and emotionally guarded, they monitor, they stay informed, they stay present, just far enough away to stay safe. And here's the paradox. The colder he appears, the more mental energy he's often spending. Silence isn't peace. Silence can be strategy. He may not ask where you are, but he notices when your patterns change. He may not text, but he reacts internally when you don't. He may not express jealousy, but watch how his mood shifts when your attention shifts elsewhere. That quiet tightening, that internal pull, that's emotional possession trying not to be seen, because wanting you openly would require vulnerability. And vulnerability would mean admitting how deeply you affect him. So instead, he stays controlled, composed. Distant, not because you don't matter, but because you matter more than he knows how to handle. And when obsession is unspoken, it doesn't reach out, it pulls back and waits. Let's talk about the kind of attention that doesn't feel like attention at all. Because obsession doesn't always lean in. Sometimes it leans away, just enough to see if you'll follow. Oh. He goes cold after moments of closeness. Right when something real almost surfaces, right when the connection deepens, that's not coincidence. That's fear colliding with desire. Emotional closeness threatens the walls he's spent years building. So when he feels himself slipping, when he notices he's thinking about you too much, caring too deeply, he hits the brakes. Withdrawal becomes his self-protection. And here's what makes it powerful: distance creates longing. Silence amplifies meaning, and unpredictability keeps your nervous system alert. You start replaying conversations, analyzing tone, questioning your value. Meanwhile, he feels relief because space gives him control again. But watch what happens when you pull back. Suddenly, he reappears, a message, a subtle check-in, a reminder that he's still there, not fully present, but not gone. That's not indifference. That's attachment fighting exposure. Because obsession doesn't want to lose you. It just doesn't know how to stay close without unraveling. So he oscillates, warm, cold, present, absent. Not to manipulate you consciously, but to regulate himself. And if you've ever felt like you're standing at the edge of something intense, yet unreachable, that tension, that unresolved pull, that's the emotional gravity of someone who wants you deeply, but is terrified of what wanting you says about them. There's a specific kind of jealousy that doesn't look like jealousy at all. No accusations, no questions, no emotional reactions you can point to, just a shift. His tone cools when you mention someone else. His responses shorten when your world expands beyond him. His energy changes, not loudly, but noticeably. That's not neutrality. That's restraint under pressure. When someone is obsessed but emotionally guarded, they won't compete openly. Competition would expose desire, and desire would reveal vulnerability. So instead, he withdraws approval. He becomes distant. Not to punish you, but to regain emotional balance. And here's the subtle power move. He never tells you what bothers him. He lets you feel it. You sense the distance. You wonder what you did wrong. You start shrinking your world to restore the connection. That's when obsession becomes quietly consuming, because he doesn't want to control your actions. He wants to control how much you need his presence. And the most telling sign, he never fully lets go. Even when he pulls away, he keeps a thread attached, a glance, a reaction, a sudden warmth after prolonged cold. It's enough to keep you emotionally oriented toward him. This isn't about possession of your body. It's about possession of your attention. And attention is intimacy in disguise. So if his distance grows whenever you shine independently, but softens the moment you turn back, that's not coincidence. That's someone who doesn't want to lose you, but refuses to admit how deeply they want to be chosen. Let's talk about control that hides behind calm, because obsession doesn't always dominate loudly. Sometimes it governs quietly. He decides the rhythm of connection, when conversations deepen, when they end, when warmth is given, and when it's withheld. And because it's subtle, it feels natural. You adjust without realizing you're adjusting. You wait. You pause. You time your openness around his availability. That's not emotional coincidence. That's emotional leadership without responsibility. When someone is obsessed but emotionally closed, they crave importance without accountability. They want to be the emotional center of your world without offering the vulnerability required to stand in yours. So they stay composed, measured, unreactive. But notice this, he reacts most when you stop reacting. Your silence unsettles him more than your questions ever did. Your distance creates tension he can't regulate, because control only works when you're participating. That's when he resurfaces. A message, a reminder, a soft pull back into orbit, not with words of commitment, but with presence. And presence, when inconsistent, is addictive, because you start associating relief with his return, calm with his attention, worth with his response. This is how obsession binds without declaring itself. And the hardest truth, he may genuinely care, but care without emotional courage becomes control. So if you feel emotionally managed instead of emotionally met, if the connection feels powerful but incomplete, that's not confusion. That's the weight of someone who wants you close on terms that protect them from being fully seen. Here's the part that changes everything. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. Obsession feeds on your emotional availability, but it collapses in the presence of self-containment. When you stop over-explaining, when you stop chasing clarity, when you stop reacting to coldness with warmth, something in him destabilizes. Because his distance only works when it controls your behavior. When it no longer moves you, it loses its function. And suddenly, the roles reverse. He becomes restless. He watches more closely. He feels the uncertainty he once managed so well, not because he wants power, but because power kept him safe. And now safety feels threatened. This is where obsession becomes visible, not through pursuit, but through unease. He checks in indirectly. He mirrors your silence with concern. He tests connection with subtle signals. Because now he's feeling what he made you feel. And here's the truth most people never hear. Healthy love moves toward clarity. Obsessive attachment moves toward control. When someone truly wants you, they risk being known. They don't regulate intimacy through withdrawal. So if your calm presence creates anxiety in him, if your emotional steadiness makes him lean closer, that's not accidental. That's the exposure of an attachment built on imbalance. You were never asking for too much. You were asking the wrong person to meet you without armor. And the moment you stop performing emotional labor for his comfort, you step out of the gravity field he created. Let's name the illusion that keeps you stuck. You think if you're patient enough, safe enough, understanding enough, he'll soften. But emotional coldness doesn't melt through endurance. It melts through choice. And here's the hard truth. You cannot love someone into emotional availability because his distance isn't caused by your behavior. It's caused by his fear of exposure. Obsession convinces you to wait. Hope tells you he's almost there, but almost is still absence. And notice this. He shows up when there's risk of losing you, not when there's opportunity to deepen. That's not readiness. That's attachment preservation. When he senses independence, he leans in. When he senses closeness, he pulls back. That cycle isn't chemistry, it's regulation. And you don't need more insight to fix it. You need honesty, not with him, but with yourself. Ask this quietly, does this connection expand me? Or keep me vigilant, do I feel met or managed? Do I feel calm or constantly alert? Because love doesn't live in tension. Obsession does. And the moment you stop romanticizing emotional unavailability, the story changes. You stop interpreting coldness as depth. You stop mistaking silence for strength. You stop confusing restraint with maturity. And that's when the dynamic shifts, because clarity doesn't chase. Clarity stands still. And anyone who wants you must now choose step forward without armor or stay behind their walls without you. There is a moment, quiet, almost invisible, when obsession loses its grip. It's not when you confront. It's not when you demand. It's when you stop waiting. Waiting keeps you emotionally paused. Waiting hands your nervous system to someone else's timing. And obsession thrives when you suspend your life for possibility. But when you choose presence in your own life, when your joy no longer depends on his warmth, the dynamic fractures. Because emotional distance only feels powerful when it creates scarcity. When your life is full, distance becomes irrelevant. You stop filling silence with meaning. You stop interpreting coldness as mystery. You stop assigning depth to inconsistency. And here's the shift. You no longer need to understand him to trust yourself. That's freedom. When he senses this, one of two things happens. He steps forward, clearly vulnerably, without games, or he fades because control no longer works. Either outcome is truth, and truth is always lighter than uncertainty. Obsession cannot survive equality. It requires imbalance. It feeds on longing, not mutuality. So when you anchor into your own emotional steadiness, the question stops being, why is he like this? And becomes, does this meet me? And the moment that question matters more than his behavior, you are no longer under his emotional influence. You're standing in your own clarity. What you're feeling isn't intuition without reason. Your body knows before your mind catches up. That tightness in your chest when he pulls away, that relief when he returns, that constant state of emotional alertness, that's not love. That's activation. Obsession keeps your nervous system engaged, never resting, never settling, because unpredictability feels like depth when you're conditioned to chase safety. But real connection doesn't spike your emotions. It steadies them. And when you finally see that, something profound happens. You stop asking for consistency from someone invested in imbalance. You stop hoping for warmth from someone who uses coldness as armor. You stop translating behavior that already speaks clearly. And here's the quiet power in that moment. You don't need closure from him. You already have information. Information is clarity. Clarity is choice. Choice is freedom. If he were capable of meeting you emotionally, he would not need distance to manage himself. If he were ready for intimacy, it wouldn't feel like tension. Obsession wants you close, but unsure. Love wants you secure, even if it risks loss. And when you honor your need for emotional safety, you end the cycle without drama. No confrontation. No explanations. Just alignment. because the deepest shift isn't walking away. It's no longer abandoning yourself to stay connected. Let this land gently, but firmly. Someone can think about you constantly, miss you deeply, even feel obsessed with you, and still be unable to love you in a way that feels safe. Obsession without courage doesn't build connection. It builds tension, it builds control, it builds longing without relief, and you were never meant to live inside someone else's fear. If his coldness keeps you questioning your worth, that is not depth. If his distance makes you work harder for scraps of closeness, that is not intimacy. If his presence feels powerful but never peaceful, that is not love. You don't need to be more patient. You don't need to be less emotional. You don't need to wait for someone to heal at your expense. The truth is simple and freeing. The right connection does not require you to decode silence. It does not punish you with distance. It does not make you smaller to stay chosen. And when you stop mistaking obsession for meaning, you reclaim your power. Because love is not proven by how intensely someone watches you from a distance, but by how bravely they step towards you without armor. Ending statement. The moment you choose emotional safety over emotional intensity, you stop being someone's fixation and become someone's equal.